This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland part of the lane, locked to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The Cleveland Cavaliers kept their home cooking alive. A perfect record at home after a win over the Toronto Raptors. I thought the defense really came through in this game. Nice balanced scoring attack. And joining me today is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez, to help me break it down. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, buddy. I had a little Friendsgiving with some college buddies up in Bowling Green, so drove myself up there and back today and had a great time. Came home and saw the Cavaliers win yet again, and it's just again it's getting a little hard. You know, I remember back when the team was not so great, and after a couple bad weeks in a row, I'd kind of say to you before the show, like, what the heck are we even going to talk about, man? Are we going to say the same stuff again? Are we just going to, like, is this pod just going to be us repeating ourselves? Like, and I was, getting a little frustrated with that. I remember, we always figured something out, but I would have that thought. I'm starting to have that thought in the inverse, where I'm like, I don't know what new ground to cover because they're just doing it. Every game kind of is the same story.
Well, that's why it's really important that you have me here, that you have someone that's going to put together these rundowns, because I always got stuff to talk about.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm always here to yap it up. And I got to say, I was a little jealous, and this is going to sound weird, but it didn't work out for me being able to podcast after the Celtics game. I was at a work conference, and by the time I got home, it was the fourth quarter already. But I thought you and Mac did an absolutely fantastic job. I really appreciated the breakdown, but I really echo the sentiment that you said in that podcast where, sometimes it is a lot easier when you kind of have that body to dissect. But I do think, now that we are transitioning to a different part of this season for the Cavs, and honestly, I think you kind of heard a lot of this in the post-game comments from Kenny Atkinson, Jared Allen, and basically the roster from top to bottom. They're holding themselves to a really high standard. And, even tonight, where I thought they had a great defensive effort, you heard Kenny and Ty and some of those guys mention, hey, we're reaching in. We're fouling a little bit too much. Like, here's the areas that we can clean up. We looked a little rusty at times, after some time off. Like, they're very process oriented as a team, and I love that we are kind of getting to see behind the curtain of what they're working on, because they really don't seem like a team that is content with the success that they've had, and it's very clear that they are holding themselves to a high standard and have goals above what we're seeing in the regular season.
Yeah, it's I said it to you during post game while we were waiting to go live. It's just like this team just doesn't feel all that satisfied, and for what it's worth, I tend to agree with them. The Raptors only put up a 105 offensive rating. So you go, hey, there you go. Great defense. That would be, a league leading defense. But you also got to note they missed 12 free throws,
Yep.
Almost, in a game with 102 possessions, every missed free throw is a point per possession. So they hit 8 of those 12 that they missed, which is pretty normal in the NBA. And all of a sudden it's a 112, offensive rating. Or 113. Yep. And I think they kind of know that their defensive metrics slightly overperformed their actual defensive performance, I think is kind of the tone I got from them. And it's just not a satisfied team. And it doesn't mean they're not celebrating each other, not celebrating the moments. And again, I continue just to be blown away at the degree to which this team can throw a knockout punch, Justin. They are, the I think it was a Donovan 3 into a Ty 3 to take, a 6 or an 8 point lead to 15. Like, it's just like it happened so fast. The team has no idea. The team they're playing has no idea how to answer. And it's been such a joy knowing that they're like Prime Tyson, they've just got that that right just cocked and ready to go. And as soon as the team is, as soon as the opposition gives them an inch, they take a mile and they send them to the mat. And it's really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, there's almost like a casual greatness to this team this season where, I think part of it has to do with their ability to get production from so many different guys, right? Ethan Sands from Cleveland.com had a great stat, which is through 17 games, the Cavs have never had a leading score for repeat games. Like it's always been someone new, from game to game. And, I think that has helped them be able to attack a variety of defenses, to be able to sustain, a high level of offensive performance. And even at times where they've struggled, they've been able to kind of find that guy to get them going. And I think, the casual greatness of someone like Donovan Mitchell, I think shouldn't be taken for granted, because I really do feel like the context that Donovan's been put in this year is perfect for him. Like he hasn't had to overwork. He hasn't had to do too much. He is still capable of going off and scoring in kind of these extended bursts. But I feel like we're keeping him fresh for those bursts. There isn't too much of a playmaking burden on them. There isn't too much of a scoring burden. And he's just able to kind of pick his spots. And, we highlighted it earlier in the season where it felt like there was a few too many possessions where he has premeditated what he's doing out there. And you're always going to get some of that with the elite scorers, because, they want to feel the ball in their hands. They want to get comfortable. They want to, test what their defender is capable of. But I really do feel like his offense is coming so much more within the flow of the team's overall offense.
Yeah, I mean, we don't talk about Donovan enough on this show, as a general truism, and I think it's just because it's kind of hard sometimes with him to analyze much further than Donnie good scoring. Like, because he really is just such an elite scorer. I thought, I think you want, first off, to just echo your point, I think you're absolutely right. I do think he is really figuring out where he's going to attack in rhythm. His last 3 games, not counting the Pelicans game, because I'm not sure he ever had to break into more than a light jog in that one in his 20 minutes. But, versus Chicago, 37, at Boston, 35 tonight with 26. Just really, really scoring in a lot of different ways. I thought against Boston, his floater game was unbelievable. Really, really strong after a rough first couple quarters. And then in this game, his body control, man, is just unbelievable. The kind of twisting left-handed reverse layup off of a cut with Scotty draped all over him was just like, it made it look easy. And I think 80% of NBA players don't even try that layup at the angle his body was at. And certainly I think, of that 80%, 90% of them smoke that layup. And he just puts it in like it's nothing. I mean, just the body control is so good. He is really figuring out more and more and more how to leverage his explosion into easy finishes. He's been a joy to watch the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and this wasn't necessarily an easy matchup, to score that effortlessly. Like I think the fact that Donnie, Ty Jerome, Darius, even the bigs all had such efficient nights offensively. Like this isn't an easy team to do that. When you look at guys like Jamal Shead and Davion Mitchell and Jonathan Mogbo coming in off the bench, like I thought he was hellacious in his minutes as a point of attack defender. Like it really gave me flashbacks to, what they were able to do with OG Anunoby, throwing him on Donnie or throwing him on Darius to really kind of gum up the offense. And you can kind of see how this team's been turning a little bit of a corner, right? Like they had that OT loss in Boston. They blew out the Pacers. They beat the Timberwolves. Like they've been on a bit of a groove, and especially since getting Scotty back. And, I think it's a good test for their offense. There were times where Toronto was really able to put a lot of pressure at the point of attack. Shed and Mitchell in particular, like those guys, they're just so hard to get around.
Yeah, they're tough, man. They really were giving Craig a lot of trouble.
I was about to say, like, versus teams with Toronto's record, I think you can get away with, minutes with Craig Porter Jr. and Jalen Tyson out there, kind of with some of the starters and just kind of the normal flow of the rotation. What they're able to do defensively and the way that they pressure you, that made that lineup, suffer. There's no other way to put it. Like, you got to give Toronto a lot of credit for what they were able to do defensively. And I just thought overall, it was kind of proof, even though there were stretches where the offense kind of got bogged down and struggled a bit. I think the overall efficiency and the way that they were able to get around on the court really kind of highlights just how much more effective this offense is and how they are able to attack you in a lot of ways. Because I remember playing Toronto in the past with the length they have, and they've always played this style of defense. It looked really hard for Evan Mobley to have an impact on the game. Like it was just like, it was really apparent that, he didn't have enough in his bag to really take advantage of them. And I felt the opposite tonight. I thought Mobley, even though he probably could have got a few more shots up, I thought the playmaking was really strong. He took advantage of, smaller defenders at times and was moving around well without the ball. I thought the passing between the two bigs was really good. Like, I just feel like the structure of this offense is putting them in a much, much better position where it doesn't matter as much what individual defenders are out there.
Yeah. I mean, I just really haven't seen the only defense I've seen the Cavs take, or that have taken the Cavs out of their game so far, is Boston. Mm-hmm. And the Cavs scored 117 points in that game. Right. I really just think that they have been relatively matchup proof thus far in the season. Again, Boston is the only caveat I'll add, because I thought their switching did do a really good job of gumming things up.
Yep.
And I think we talked a lot about this summer about how if shooting was the number one thing the roster needed to address, playmaking last offseason, then this offseason, playmaking was the number one thing the team needed to address. And again, they just have so many ways of attacking you. They have so many players who can initiate offense right now, and it makes it just impossible to know where the attack is coming from, And we're getting lit up in the YouTube comments, rightfully so, for not talking about Ty Jerome yet. And this is a probably a good bridge, but like, they have actions. They're running so many 3-point guard sets right now where you have Ty Jerome initiating the action, and Darius and Donovan are getting stuff run for them on the weak side. And Ty Jerome has been so good that that is a reasonable choice. And like, it just makes it too hard. It makes it too hard. Like, whatever, eventually you're going to mess up. And, they ran I wasn't sure if it was a split cut. I got to go look a little closer, but they ran that play where Donovan is setting like a screen for Darius at the top. And then he kind of slips down for a wide open layup after they send two on the ball. Like, they just have so many ways of attacking you right now, and I just don't think defenses have figured anything out. And you're kind of seeing it, like, watching, like, pay attention to what the opposing broadcast is saying if you have League Pass. Check out what reporters of the other teams are saying on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever it might be, because what you're seeing a lot is like, oh man, what are they just got to try to survive. Like, they got to hang because because the Cavs are just, no one has an easy answer right now for what to do with this Cavs offense.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about the advantage of having one elite playmaker and one elite big on the court at all times, but I just think it takes it to another level when you have a third guard like a Ty Jerome that you're able to pair with either guards, right? Like, Ty is able to bridge those minutes where, okay, he plays half of his shift with Darius, half of his shift with Donnie, and like, it just, the amount of playmaking you have in that backcourt alone, I think makes them really dynamic. And then when you add the playmaking prowess of an Evan Mobley or Jared Allen in those minutes, you have a lot of juice in those lineups, and I think, there was a reason why we were so excited about adding Ty Jerome as a player that doesn't turn the ball over, and is a steady hand at point guard, that is able to be a sound defender and stay in position, and he's got good length at 6'5". Like, we love that archetype, and that was why we were really excited about him joining the team last year. But when you add this kind of leap that he's taken this season as a scorer to the mix, like, it's just a completely different dynamic. Like, he is such a damn difference maker. And at this point, like, there was a comment in the YouTube chat prior to us going live here saying that he should be most improved player. Like, I think there is absolutely a case for him to be most improved player. I think there is a very strong case for him to be sixth man of the year. And, I just think what he is able to provide in every facet of the game is something that they really sorely missed. And, to this point, prior to this game, the core four and Ty Jerome lineup did not work well. I think a lot of that, well, obviously it was very, very small sample size, but I think a lot of that was because the bulk of those minutes came in that game against the Celtics. And, I don't think that's Ty's fault. I think, Darius obviously had a disastrous game and Boston was bombing away. But, they had a minus 55 net rating coming into this game and a plus 40 net rating in this game. And I think when I look at it from kind of a structural standpoint, I think Ty Jerome playing some minutes at the three and that three guard lineup, like, I think that's something that they're going to be able to go to more in this season. And my guess is it's going to work out for them more often than not, because he does at least have, the length and the size to kind of defend up in that position. And it's just so much playmaking, and there's so many dynamic players on the court when it is those five, that I like that as a look.
I mean, it's just, I feel like it's no surprise that the team has done so well in the Karras minutes and in the Ty minutes with this team, and with this offense, because they have so much flexibility. I mean, the scoring is just nuts, man. I just don't know what to say about it. It's like, and the more it keeps happening, the less likely it is that it's an aberration, like, we are not, like, someone in the YouTube mentioned Linsanity, and it's like Linsanity was like 5 games, 5-6 games, and of the crazy performances, right? So, like,
this is more like Hallie Sanity last year. It's gone on for 6 weeks. That's enough to get Ty an all NBA spot at this point.
Oh my goodness, you are such a hater. I just, I think at this point, we're about, we're almost at the quarter mark of the season.
Yeah.
And he has not one iota dropped off. In fact, he's played his best 3 of his best 4 games of his NBA career in the last week. I mean, he's put up 24-10. The 10 was against Boston, which was actually a pretty efficient game. He went 4 of 5 from the field and had 5 assists. Then he puts up 29 and 26. It's like, and he's only crossed the 30-minute threshold once.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the per minute stuff is bananas. The efficiency is bananas. Again, he keeps getting steals. He had 4 steals tonight. Like, I think he's been indisputably the best backup point guard in basketball. And I just think he makes this team, again, we've talked so much about when you make an all-in trade for Donovan Mitchell, where you trade, 5 first-round picks and a couple of years of pick control, and then you extend this core 4, with all these big contracts and long-term contracts. If you're gonna take a jump, you have to get lucky, or you have to find a diamond in the rough. You have to have guys that are just like, whoa, he's this? Since when? And that, you look at that Warriors team, and they had it up and down the roster. The ones we keep talking about, those 15 Warriors. They had Sean Livingston's. They had, they found Leandro Barbosas. They traded for Andrew Bogut, who didn't have the craziest reputation at the time. Like, they found all this help, and like, I feel like that's what Kobe Altman's done with this roster. Like, and Ty Jerome is like the best example of it. You have to win on the margins and with your core, especially if you don't have like a bona fide top 3 type player. You don't have a LeBron James. You have to win up and down your team building. And like, I think Ty has just been the best example of that.
Yeah, well, that's why, like, thinking back to Wednesday's game, Ty was obviously a huge part of that win over the Pelicans, but you also had, the two-way guys that looked good in their minutes. You had Jalen Tyson getting his first career start and, working his way towards a triple-double, like impacting the game in so many different ways. I understand it was the second and third strings for the Pels, but we're talking about our second and third string, like two-way guys, and they were looking better than those Pelicans players. So I think stuff like that is why we monitor what's happening with the Cleveland Charge. That's why we're, looking for those practice stories with guys like Jalen Tyson. But you're right. Like, what Ty Jerome is doing is just giving them such a big boost. And I think back to the offseason where, people got very angsty about the lack of moves that the Cavs had made. And, one of kind of the sarcastic comments that was going around is, the team's going to act like adding Ty Jerome is their big offseason move. Okay. God, like, it kind of feels like he was the best addition of the offseason, right? Like, we sit here and I think in the transaction window, we get so worked up over, names changing teams and whatnot. And so often, like, more often than not, it looks like Gabe Vincent going to the Lakers or, Caleb Martin going to the Sixers. Like, that hasn't moved the needle in any way, shape, or form. But what Ty Jerome is doing this season, like, I just love the process of it. Like, intellectually, I know the 3-point shooting isn't going to stay this good for a full season because, like, nobody has ever done that at, like, any volume. He's not going to shoot 60% from three. It's just not going to happen. But his last year in Golden State before coming over, he did shoot 39% from three. If he shoots, 43% and it comes down to 43%, I don't think that changes how effective he's been as a player because every other aspect of his game I think is a perfect fit for how they play. Like that little floater in between game and how in control he is in the lane.
The nastiness. I just keep going back to the nastiness. How valuable it is for this team.
That is a textbook example of how he has played as a player. He's always been under control. He's never doing things too quickly. Like that floater in the lane, his body is in complete control. Like he creates space because of his ability to decelerate, very similar to like a Kyle Anderson. Like, I
Tristan compared him to Luka on the post game tonight.
Hey, you know what? I'll take that too.
And George slapped him down.
Well, he should slap him. He's a much better shooter than Luka. But you're right. Like the nastiness. Like I love the fact that guys can't feel like they can just freely dribble around Ty Jerome because he's going to get into their personal space. He is going to make them feel uncomfortable and he's going to turn that into steals. And, I just think that it is such a luxury to have a guy like Ty Jerome coming in off the bench. And, it's going to be really interesting when this team is fully healthy, kind of whose minutes suffer. Right now, I would be stunned if that is Ty Jerome. Like, I think that he has absolutely earned that ball handling duty. And one of the things we talked about was, Ty coming into the season, we were talking about how Ty kind of gives them insurance for those nights where Karras doesn't really have it, right? Like he gives you kind of a more steady ball handler that doesn't have the same ceiling as a Karras LeVert, but comes with a higher floor. He is proving that he's got that same ceiling right now. And I don't know what to do with that.
He is more than an insurance at this point. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm pretty comfortable saying he's been the 5th best player on the team this year. Like,
I think that's fair.
Like he has been our best role player. And that's not for lack of competition either. Obviously, Karras being hurt has made it easier for him to get all these opportunities. But like, that's the nice thing. The Karras tie minutes don't feel or haven't as of yet felt like my turn, your turn, or like, oh, no, who's going to get to run the second unit offense? It's like, no, they just kind of like the way this offense works, just whoever, happens to be initiating on the set is who initiates on the set. And it doesn't, there's just, I guess that's really just a good way to say it. I don't feel any tension in this offense. I don't sense
I like that. Yeah.
Like, I don't sense that there is a, like or like a pressure that builds. I think in years past you might have seen, okay, Darius has had 3 or 4 plays where he's kind of the main guy, so now we got to get Donovan a couple runs as the main. It kind of just feels like everything just kind of comes naturally, and like that's, anyone who's played basketball at any level, whether it's pickup or high school ball, when you are in that flow state on offense where you actually don't care. You don't care if you're initiating it because you haven't initiated it a couple times because the team's just pinging the ball around and it just feels decisive and connected. Like, that is the best. A tensionless offense is a really, really fun thing to get to see.
It is a really fun thing to get to see. I think for the most part, when I look at the core, this has been exactly what we were hoping to see coming into this year. And to kind of see the depth of this roster really come into place where, George Niang's had a very good year, had a very tough night tonight, but, you had enough depth to make up for it.
He said
right?
it himself. He's like, I sucked tonight on the post game.
Look, George is always going to be honest, and we love him for it. But, they have the depth to overcome that, right? Like, they have the depth to overcome Darius going 3 of 21 against the Celtics, right? Like that was still a game. And, the depth to overcome that on a night where you're missing every single small forward, right? Like that it just goes to show you like how deep this team is, how well constructed it is. And, when you have someone like Ty Jerome, who you and I were both a big fan of, and you get more than you initially bargained for, like that is the ultimate luxury. And, it's the same way I feel about Zoom AI Companion. Like, we already love Zoom as it is, but when you get that extra little feature, it just makes such a big difference because only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion.
Dude, it's funny because Niang obviously had a nightmare shooting night. He goes 0 of 8. Sam Merrill goes 1 of 4. And a few folks in the Discord were like, man, if only we were shooting, only we were hitting from 3. And I'm like, guys, we're at like 42% from 3 right now. And like, what does it say to you about this roster and the shooting talent that you can have Niang and Merrill combined to go 1 for 12 from 3 in a game, and you still shoot 39%?
Well, not to toot our own horns, but I do like tooting my own horn. I feel like that was one of our kind of primary points coming out of last year was that we had the shooting talent and guys just had down shooting years and, the offense made things a little harder than it needed to be. And we wouldn't be surprised to see it kind of go in the other direction. And I just feel like when you look at the shot quality that they're getting and really the quality of the playmaking, like I keep coming back to that because there are so many times where the ball zips around like prime Spurs basketball. I just love the way that we generate shots. And I feel like that is one of the biggest differences between last year and this year. Obviously, guys being healthy, not dealing with lower body injuries that's going to impact their ability to shoot from deep is a factor in this. But I feel like the routes we are taking to getting our shots is dramatically better than it was last year. And that's what's making us feel like a more potent team from deep, even though we're taking fewer threes than we did last season. Like, I think last year was volume for the sake of volume. And all right, we need to get these up. We understand the math problem. Whereas this year, we are hunting for shots in such a more effective way that, when we're going away from the 3, it never feels like, they're just kind of forcing shots at the rim. When we're bombing away from 3, it never feels like, they're taking these quick threes and they're not really getting good looks and it kind of feels lazy. Like anytime it happens, it feels like that is what the defense is surrendering and we are forcing them into tough decisions.
Yeah. I mean, and like I went on the Athletic NBA show with Dave Dufour, and they kind of mentioned that and everyone keeps saying this, and they're probably right. Like, hey, the 3-point shooting has got to normalize. They're not going to shoot 42% all year, and that's probably true, right? But what I said to them is that who's taking the threes? Who is getting the vast bulk of the attempts and it's mostly guys that are really great shooters. Donovan Mitchell is leading the team in 3-point attempts per game at 8.9. He's shooting 41% on them. It's very possible that on the shot diet Donovan Mitchell is shooting, that he might hang around 40% for a season. It's not like he's taking a ton of crazy. He certainly takes a few difficult ones, but he's getting a ton of catch and shoot threes, including a couple tonight. Darius Garland's taking 6.7. He's at 44%. You might expect a couple percentages to drop off of that. That's a pretty insane number. But then the next two are George Niang and Sam Merrill, both tied at 4.8 attempts per game. They're both under 38%. George is now under 35 after tonight. He's at 34.5. Sam's at 37. Then Dean Wade is next at 3.9 at 35%. So they are, yes, they have some outliers. It's indisputable. Ty Jerome is not going to shoot 54% from three. Isaac Okoro is not going to shoot 47% from three. Karis LeVert is not going to shoot 46% from three. That's all well and good, but they have enough really good shooters that actually are underperforming, that even if some of their guys come to earth a little bit, the place where their volume sits is actually pretty normalized. Yeah. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, maybe I've just got the wine and gold colored glasses on here, but like, I think if you are a Cavaliers skeptic and you're waiting for the bottom to fall out of this 3-point percentage, I just think you're going to keep waiting most of the year.
I think it's going to fall off at times for certain guys, but the bottom isn't going to fall out when you have so many guys that are capable of doing it, right? Like Max Strus is going to be rejoining this lineup, and I know people got frustrated with his streaky shooting last year, but as I've pointed out before, he shot 39% from three in the games that Darius played. He took a big step forward last year. I thought last year was the best season of his career. I thought he took a big step forward as a playmaker, so he's going to help generate shots. And when you have an offense that when someone doesn't have it going, we can find someone else that does. I think that really helps raise your floor. And of course, there's going to be nights where, it's 3 games in 4 nights. You've traveled a bunch. Guys are feeling a little under the weather where you just don't shoot that well. But, even in those games, like, I think one of the benefits of nobody playing too many minutes is somebody is going to have fresh legs. Like, I think that's a big part of what Ty Jerome has been able to do. Because when you look at even his Warriors tenure, he had a really great season that last year in Golden State, but his best stretches came with Steph Curry out of the lineup where he was playing a lot of minutes, and I think it wore him down over time. When you're able to keep him fresh and he can just come in and kind of deliver these knockout blows, like I think that helps make it more sustainable. Like, nobody is being overtaxed, and I think when you're obviously, no one's. I think anytime you're shooting over 43%, it's a little unsustainable. You mentioned it on the last podcast. It's my favorite stat. Like, that's what Steph shoots for his career when you leave him wide open, when no defender's within 6 feet. There's no type of defense you can play that's going to make a team shoot better than Steph Curry wide open, because he's the greatest shooter of all time. But I do think the shot diet that this team is getting is very sustainable. I think the shooting talent on this roster is deep. I think the playmaking talent on this roster is deep. And I just feel like that type of environment is going to generate a lot of good looks, and that's going to help prevent the bottom from falling out. It's not like they were relying on one player to take a large number of difficult shots, and that's the majority of where their shooting profile is coming from.
I have a question for you. So the Cavs right now are 14th in 3-point attempt rate per 100 possessions. They take about 36.9. Boston is in first by a country mile at 50.8. Up next is Charlotte at 44.8. So they're 6 more than the second place. Would you sacrifice some 3-point accuracy? Boston, by the way, is down to 14th. It's actually like the inverse. They're perfect inverses, where Boston is 14th in percentage and first in attempts. We're 14th in attempts, first in percentage. Would you sacrifice that percentage to get some more attempts up, or are you fine with the offense as is?
I'm fine with it as is. I think the offense The shots we are taking are the result of what the defense is giving us. And I think that is the most important thing. I think there's only a few stretches this season that I can point to where I'm like, we got away from our offense. And I'd really like to get into that, shortly here, because I think the Boston game was one of those examples. But I think for the most part, we are doing a really good job of keeping opposing defenses engaged. All 5 guys have to be involved in the defense. And I think that is the true essence of spacing. When, there's enough movement within your offense that nobody gets to stand around and kind of play, full-time free safety. That to me is the biggest difference, because even in the 2 big lineup, we have a 122 offensive rating with the 2 bigs on the court. That is better than any team in the NBA other than the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so much of kind of the common perception of spacing is 4 guys standing out on the perimeter. No, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, they are moving around. They are forcing defenders to commit. They are forcing you, to come up to the
Isaac
three-point line.
Okoro is moving around.
Exactly. Okoro's a great example of that. He's being used as a screener, right? I thought even against Boston, Craig Porter Jr. being used as a screen there, right? Like it's smart things like that to make sure that nobody gets to be a passive participant defensively. They are keeping everybody involved. And I just feel like, I care about generating good shots more than I care about generating a specific shot. And I think that we are attacking from the 3-point line at the proper rate. I think that our where we're getting our shots from has been very organic, and I would not increase the volume just for the sake of increasing the volume. I think if teams changed up how they defended us, our shot profile would change as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I come down is, listen, it's the best offense in the NBA right now. I'm not changing anything until I have to. And something that I really, I felt like last year the attempts were up, but they didn't always feel great. The accuracy, obviously, I didn't think matched the quality of the Cavs personnel. I'm super cool being a team that is middle of the road and how many threes they attempt. If almost every one of those threes feels great in terms of how it's coming up. And the only people who really take quote unquote bad threes right now are Darius and Donovan. And they are the 2 best shooters off the dribble on the team.
Ty has taken some audacious threes.
You're right.
Let's give him some love there.
Yeah. So, but I think under duress, if he's not already going on one of these volcanic runs, he is Darius will take one just cause. Donovan will take one just cause. Ty typically works his way up to a crazy 3-point attempt, at least thus far. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it's going to come down. I just don't think it's going to. I guess the crux of what I'm going for is I think the percentage will go down. I don't think it will go down so much that the offense will feel meaningfully worse.
Yep.
And that is a huge dub.
Well, I think, on those nights that it's not falling, I think they've done a good job of being able to generate those looks. And, one of the things I'm really excited to see is, it does seem like right now, at least based on what they're saying, they are trying to pick up the slack on the defensive end. They've noticed a little bit of that slippage recently. And, I think one of the biggest things is we got through that initial stretch. I don't believe I said this on the podcast, but, those first 17 games came over the course of 28 days. The next 17 come over the course of 43. Like, that is a material difference in terms of how much rest this team is going to have. And I think the fact that they have this good of a record, through 18 games, 17-1, like that's unbelievable. They weathered the storm, and now they're going to be able to, be more rested. They're going to be able to approach these games and get some, practice time, a few more days off, 2 days off in Cleveland. You don't have to travel before you play Atlanta. Like, that's a really nice luxury to have. They've been in Cleveland for a while now. They're not traveling. I think sometimes that kind of stuff gets overlooked, and I think we're going to start to see them do a little bit of problem solving here.
Yeah, I think that they actually have time to really work. Again, I'm glad that this is happening right coming off of the loss, because Kenny actually gets to just sit and grind tape for a minute and can actually really work on coaching the team. so much of the NBA schedule, you just look at it and you can be a pull up your bootstraps kind of basketball fan, but quit talking about the schedule so much. But like literally the practicality of like some of the denseness of the early schedule made it kind of impossible for them to do much. Like there's literally just not time to practice. And like they have time to practice. They have time to actually sit in the office and review and pitch ideas back and forth about how to proceed with things. And you just get so much out of that, especially with a staff that seems to be as insane as their head coach in terms of how much time they spend grinding and how again, I just keep going back. We talked about this at the beginning. It just does not seem like a complacent staff or a complacent team. Like, I think they left this game being like, damn, we gotta stop letting teams back into games against us. Like we are, and like they won by 14, and it really never was what I would define as a sweaty game. Like I never felt any anxiety watching this game, even when Toronto got it within 6.
Well, I sent the graphic to you, the LeBron quote of I've been in adverse situations before, and I just didn't feel like this was one of them. It very much felt like that against the Toronto Raptors.
So yeah, I feel like I feel like I'm more content with the team's performance than the team is. And like whenever, and like that sounds like an obvious statement, but like I feel like if I were in that room, I'd just be like, another double-digit win. How about it? 17-1. But like they don't seem that way, and I think it bodes well. It's not like an overly negative pressure. It's just like, we left some stuff on the table, and we need to be better about that. I think about Donovan apologizing in Chicago after he was chasing the triple-double, or against Chicago. Sorry. And like it's just these little indicators that are like, Kenny talking about how the team's 27th in the league at fouling off of drives. Like they know the stuff that keeps them from being the optimal versions of themselves. And that just bodes so well, because if they solve any of that and keep doing the stuff they're doing, well, first off, if they solve that stuff, it gives them margin for error for certain things to regress. Things like the 3-point shot. It also just raises their ceiling long term. It takes them from really, really good team in the regular season to team that has an answer for everything. And teams that have answers for everything tend to win championships. And I think this team is in that kind of mindset.
They're in a championship mindset. Like I don't think there is any situation that would make the Cavs the favorite to win a championship. I think Boston has earned that right. I think Boston would obviously be favored in a series against the Cavs. But I think they understand that, hey, if we take care of business, if we do everything that we can to minimize kind of the self-inflicted wounds and whatnot, we can give ourselves a chance to upset them, to beat them in a series. And if you do that, you have a very good chance of winning a championship, because the West, even though the records are, there's a fair amount of winning records, I don't think there's anyone that
the
looks
top end of the
correct.
West is, I don't see it right now.
Yeah.
Unless you're a really big OKC fan, which I get.
Yeah. And I would say that about OKC if there wasn't for this Chet injury, but, I think there's a very real possibility that, coming back, when he does come back, if he does come back from that broken hip, and it might look a little bit like Darius last year. Like that is a serious traumatic injury that's going to take some time to get back from. But on the subject of problem solving, there is something I want to get into before we get out of here. But I do need to say, our next podcast is going to be Tuesday. I want to do a bit of a mailbag for that one. I think it's a great time to give some mailbag questions, because there won't be
no games.
No games between then and now. Send in your questions, chasedownpod@gmail.com, or you can find us on @chasedownpod, either on Twitter or on Blue Sky. Send us questions there. If you're in our Discord, obviously, you can send us questions anytime. But I think it'd be a great time, around the Thanksgiving holiday to hear from you guys and kind of answer some of those questions, heading into a very important NBA Cup game on Friday against the Atlanta Hawks, and a home and home against the Atlanta Hawks. But I do want to talk on the subject of problem solving about Darius's game against Boston. I actually think that this Raptors game was a great contrast, because one, I was getting very ready to do my normal Scotty Barnes rant after he stepped on Scotty's foot. It looked like Darius got hurt, and I thought he played pretty passively in the first half after that. I thought he had passed up some threes and was kind of floating a little bit more than he usually did. I thought he got it back together in the second half for the most part. I didn't love his decision making in the paint, but I thought overall Darius had a really good game. But I think the Boston game is a perfect example. And I know he missed the next game with the groin, but I really didn't feel like it was too kind of injury focused when it came to his performance there. I think that was a great example of him allowing errors to be compounding. Because I think there are times where you're going to have a poor shooting game, like the 0 of 5 from 3, I'm fine with that. But I really felt like he was forcing the issue far too much. And when you look at his season coming into that game, 40% of his shots were coming with 2 or fewer dribbles. In that game, it dropped by 11%. The number of shots that came with 2 or fewer dribbles, and 40% of his shots came with 7 or more. And
that was a lot of what last year was. He had a lot. His dribbles per shot were very high last year.
That is true, but I think last year, like when he had his bad games, which there was a lot of them last year, I feel like he was floating a lot and kind of forcing the issue. But this felt more like game 3 against the Knicks, where he went 4 of 21 and was just really kind of getting the shots up. It didn't feel like the Hawks play-in game, where I thought his shot diet was really good, but the shot making just wasn't there. Like just a couple that rimmed out. I think that Darius needs to find ways to play more under control on nights where the shot isn't falling, particularly in those matchups. I think he has it within him to do so, but I just think, on nights where the shot isn't falling, you don't need to have like that fast break possession where he had his back to the defender, forced up a shot and killed the momentum of that play. I think Darius currently is having an all-star season and frankly, an all-NBA caliber season. But the difference between the level that we've seen from Darius in the past and that all-NBA level that we need to get him to is consistency and the ability to play through your bad shooting games, your inefficient games, and still have an impact on the game. I think that is an evolution that Donovan has made and something that I'm going to keep an eye on when it comes to Darius this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Donovan has different margins for error on it too. He could figure out how to, use his explosiveness and his body control and all the things that make him just a 99th percentile athlete that Darius doesn't have. I half agree with you, I guess is what I'll say. I think that there were certainly some of the transition plays are really where you feel Darius force it most. I feel like it's the loudest because I don't think he's a good transition finisher. I'd
agree with that. Yeah.
At least, relative to his other skills, I see him smoke more layups than most players of his caliber in a transition setting. And I think it's because he's typically attacking a bigger defender that is just set in focusing on him. And he had a few of them that were really ugly, really forced, and it was like he felt like, oh, I've got the ball in transition, I'm having a nightmare game, this is going to get me going. But with that said, I think he had plenty of correct reads where he was shooting because it was there. He's running a side pick and roll, and Horford has one step closer to Mobley or Jarrett than he does to Darius. And Darius has a guard in his back hip, and he goes to the floater, and he was just shorting everything. He just didn't have his legs, not just as a jump shooter, but he didn't have the legs under his floater. So everything was a little flat. Everything felt a little dead coming off his hand. So I think he just also had just a really bad touch game. And I don't think you can decision make your way out of that. I had some folks saying he's got to stop shooting, and it's like, well, then what? Like, there's with the way Boston's playing you, then you might as well just get off the floor, And by the way, if the team had been more healthy, I think Kenny might have considered it. He hasn't been afraid to sit his best players down the stretch. Jarrett sat more than a couple times. But like, I don't know. So I kind of go a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, where it's like, yeah, he just had a bad game, but I don't think it was like completely reckless. I just think he certainly had possessions where it was like, that possession I watched you try to shoot yourself back into the game.
Right. And basically that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think obviously fatigue was a factor in that one. It's trying to reduce the number of kind of compounding errors, because I agree with you. Like, I think a lot of those open shots, I'm glad that he's taking it. I think it's more so, all right, I'm not getting by guys as easily as I normally do. I don't need to kind of force this in the paint, right? Like, I still have a defender on my hip. I don't need to kind of throw it up. And I thought he did, some of that even tonight against Toronto, where the decision-making could have been better in the paint. And it's funny because it almost seems like when he's tired, he's more prone to go all the way to the rim than he is to kind of stop with that little jump floater. And I just feel like when he's been at his best this season, he's been under control in the paint. He's not leaving his feet before making a decision. And I felt like he was leaving his feet before making a decision against Boston. And I thought he rushed some of those decisions. And, maybe being shorthanded was part of it, or whatever the case may be. But I think that very easily could have been a 3 of 15 game for Darius, where I felt better about his overall process, where, he just didn't force the issue on as many possessions and still tried to play within the flow of the offense. Don't turn down a single open shot. Like, still take those. I don't care if you're 0 of 7. The offense is going to break down if you're passing up open shots. But I just feel like, and it's a level that I think Donovan's got to, and I think the best players kind of recognize this, where, they don't get passive because they don't have it going, but they don't force the issue as frequently as Darius did in that game. And I think that's a very small distinction. I think you're correct to say that, it's a mix of both. But I think that is one of the kind of areas that I'm looking to see his game mature. Because I think, I think what he did against Boston is very different than last year. I think last year he would have gone into a shell and he would have floated. That's why I brought up, the 4 of 21 game against the Knicks, because that was just a bad decision-making game when he was fully healthy. And the next game, he started off poorly in game 4 against the Knicks. And then, he kept shooting. He got them back into the game. If Mobley didn't get into foul trouble, they very easily could have tied up that series. So I don't want him to lose that aggressiveness. I think 3 of 21 is a lot easier to solve. And there's more kind of there's more usable film from that than what we saw in the Magic series when things were going poorly. But I think it's really important for us, when we talk about what are we going to have to talk about when, we keep playing this well, I think pointing out stuff like this as an area that I'd like to see growth is really important.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say in this, talk about a great staff to go to help him figure it out when he has rough games like this.
Yes,
Johnny Bryant, Kenny Atkinson, 2 guard whisperers. A lot of great players on the team that he can lean on. And yeah, I think he is going to learn from this, and I really want to see him. I'll tell you what, I want to see him cook Al Horford a couple times before I feel good about any series against the Celtics.
Breaks my heart to see Al Horford play well against us.
I know.
It feels unnatural.
It does break the natural order.
Well, I do, before I wrap this up, I do have to, I owe someone an apology, and that man is Isaac Okoro. I had it in my notes to discuss Okoro. I thought he had a great game tonight. I thought he was shooting really well, but we've just kind of run low on time here. But I do want to point out, in those 14 minutes tonight, that starting lineup had a plus 27.7 net rating. Really, really good. For the season, the starting 5 with Isaac Okoro, 121.8 offensive rating, 109.2 defensive rating, and a plus 12.6 net rating. That lineup has absolutely rocked on both ends of the court. And I think,
how many minutes?
89.
Nice.
So we're getting close to that 100-minute line with that lineup. But I think Isaac has been awesome. And, you and I, we said the same thing when things are going well with Dean. that we felt like Max should be the starter. That's the best way to balance the lineup. I feel the same way with Okoro, but it sure does feel nice to have someone like Isaac Okoro that can step up. And I would not be surprised if this ends up being a closing lineup on a lot of nights.
Yeah, I mean, really tough game for RJ Barrett and Grady Dick. Big part of that is Isaac Okoro. He's an amazing defender, and he had a nice game on offense too. 4 assists, which was very nice to see.
Yeah, box score filling night. We love to see that.
Always like to see that for our boy.
We like to see those event stats, but hopefully we will get to see some questions from you guys for the mailbag episode on Tuesday. Remember, you can send those in to chasedownpod@gmail.com, and while you're there, it's a great opportunity to join our Discord, because anytime you send a rating or a review to chasedownpod@gmail.com, we will send you an invite there. We do appreciate everyone tuning in live on YouTube. Make sure you guys like and subscribe and click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, leave us a rating, a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it, guys. Make sure you are staying safe out there, and until next time, go Cavs.